Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. Remember when we were meant to be smoke-free by 2025? New Zealand's goal to have fewer than 5% of people smoking by the end of the year looks unlikely to be met. The target was introduced in 2010, and while smoking has dropped significantly since then, from 16.4% in 2011, for example, to 6.9% in 2023-24, there are still hundreds of thousands of people in Aotearoa smoking every day. In December 2022, New Zealand enacted world-leading tobacco control legislation, essentially creating a whole generation who'll never be able to buy a pack of ciggies. But with that plan up in smoke, what's next? Today on the front page, Hāpai te Hauora Chief Operating Officer Jason Alexander is with us to discuss how we might be able to reach our goal of being smoke-free. So Jason, what do our smoking statistics look like at the moment?
So it is 2025, obviously a big year for us. We've been aiming for 5% smoking rates across all of our populations, but we're not quite there. We won't know the official end of year data until next year, but the last rates we had was sitting just shy of 7% for all populations, and unfortunately our Māori and Pacific rates are much higher than that.
What are the rates for Māori and Pacifica?
So at last measure, we had 14.7% for Māori. That's the highest, and our Pacific whānau are not far behind. They're sitting on just over 12%, 12.3%.
What do you think the reasoning is behind that?
There's a whole lot of reasons. We started off higher to start. So before we embarked on this journey of trying to drive towards this 2025 goal, the Māori and Pacific rates were much higher. They were slower to move in the beginning, although they have accelerated over the last few years. There's a whole lot of historical reasons why Māori and Pacific rates have traditionally been higher than the rest of the population.
Are we continuing to trend downwards, or do you think the statistics have really stagnated in recent years?
So the Māori rates actually have been dropping quite a bit over the last sort of 5-10 years, I guess. But the general pop rates there was little, well, basically no change. I think it might have gone up 0.1% between the last 2 years. So it is tricky to know until we get this year's data, which will drop next year.
Recent figures I saw show about 300,000 daily smokers remain. What do you see as the biggest challenges of getting those numbers down, especially by the end of the year?
Look, by the end of the year is really tricky. So that's a lot of people that have to quit. Just for Māori alone, I think it's about 62,000 that we'd need to see quit smoking over the course of this year. Just to put that in perspective, we're getting about 11,000 quit each year based on recent trends. So it's huge. It's based off that, it's pretty obvious that we're not going to get there. Definitely not for all populations. We are still hopeful that we'll get there for the general population, but definitely not for Māori and Pacific, unless something drastic changes over the next couple of months or something's happened that we're not aware of over the past year.
And what are some of the biggest challenges there for those last remaining 300,000, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, it's an addictive product, so I don't think we should skirt around that. Nicotine's highly addictive. It's tricky to get off. A lot of people have tried. A lot of people sort of try and come back and try again, but it really does get its hooks into you, I guess, and it really is a tricky one to quit. If it was easy, then the numbers wouldn't be this high. The tobacco industry wouldn't be this large, and we wouldn't have 5,000 New Zealanders dying from tobacco-related illness every year.
Do you reckon, I know that because excise tax has gone up over the years, right? And it's now really, really expensive to buy a pack of smokes at the dairy. I used to actually be a smoker in my early 20s. And I remember when the packets went up from, I think it was like $20 to $25. And that's, in my early 20s, wasn't earning a whole bunch of money. So that's when I kind of tapered off and thought, right, I need to change what I'm doing because I just don't have the money. So those people who are still smoking today, are spending about $50 a packet, say, That's obviously not stopping them. The price isn't stopping them. Hey, so do you reckon we've kind of reached the ceiling, I suppose, in excise taxes?
Yeah, cigarettes are very expensive. What we do have to do, though, is make sure that we are increasing them in line with everything else. Otherwise, relatively, they become cheaper. So we don't want them to become cheaper in relation to other products, because that could sort of drive demand the other way. But certainly, I know in the early days, we did get some good gains through the rising of the prices of cigarettes. It did drive a lot of people to try and quit. But once again, it's such an addictive product that it's not that easy. So yes, it is costing smokers a lot of money. They obviously would much rather have that money in their back pocket, but because it's such an addictive product, it's not that simple.
And there's also the situation of illicit tobacco coming through that we've got to worry about now as well, eh?
Yeah. And it's hard to get a gauge on exactly how big that is. We've got one of the best customs in the world here in New Zealand. Like our borders are pretty tight. So yeah, whenever you increase the price of something, especially when it's addictive like this, then you are going to see people try to bring it in through other means to try and dodge those excise taxes and try and get them to people who require them because they're so addicted through other means.
Well, so we can probably agree that the smoke-free 2025 goal is not going to be hit, right? It's 2025 now, obviously. But when they envisioned it in 2010, do you think it was overly ambitious then? Or if we made the right steps, could we have actually achieved it by the end of this year?
It was ambitious, without a doubt, but it was ambitious because it needed to be. It is the biggest killer here in New Zealand. It's not something that you can sort of like foot around and just hope it gets better. You have to sort of go after it aggressively. And it was so embedded within our society, I guess, that we needed these big steps to try and get rid of it and start reducing some of the harm that our communities have experienced over the years from it. So yes, it was super optimistic, but there were some steps in there that could have got us there.
And what are some of those steps?
I mean, yeah, probably the big three are the ones that were in the super legislation that were proposed. They were a little bit late to the table, but they were three sort of, I guess, just logical things that would have made a huge difference. So first of all, making cigarettes less addictive. That obviously is going to make, if people try cigarettes, and they're less likely to get addicted to them. And if they want to try and get rid of them, then it's going to make it a bit easier for them to move on from cigarettes. Secondly, reducing the number of outlets. You can get cigarettes everywhere here. Every single dairy has got them. Some streets have got 3 dairies and all of them will have cigarettes. Like, that's totally unnecessary. If we look at the saturation of tobacco outlets, particularly in some of our poorer, our underserved communities, then there's even more there than there are in our more affluent suburbs. And the smoking rates in those suburbs, which are mostly Māori and Pacific suburbs, by the way, are reflective of those. So reducing those numbers right down just to make them less available and less prevalent in our communities would have made a huge difference. And the third was the smoke-free generation measure, which would have stopped anyone born, I think it was Jan 1, 2009. They never would have been able to buy cigarettes. So progressively increasing that age. And that would have made a huge difference. It would have obviously cut off the flow of new smokers coming in. So then we can just focus on looking after those that currently smoked. And it would have made particularly a huge difference for Māori communities, which we know the Māori population is a lot younger than the general population. So it would have been, a game changer, those three.
Well, it made international headlines when it was first announced. We were seen as being world leading, but then it was scrapped, obviously, last year. Do you reckon that was a huge mistake?
Look, I think it was. There were some people flagged the difficulties around sort of putting some of these things through, and I just think it would have been worth it. Once again, like they were aspirational, they were world leading policies. There wasn't a lot of evidence for them because we were literally the first in the world. So we were trying something different, but we were doing it for a good reason because we were trying to get rid of this insidious product from Aotearoa. So I honestly do think it was a big mistake to get rid of those. And I think we should still look at those or some variation on those 3 areas that we need to do if we're going to shift this.
The idea that more young New Zealanders should take up smoking in order to pay for tax cuts is morally reprehensible. I don't think New Zealanders thought that's what they were going to get. I don't think that's the change they were voting for when they voted at the last election. Mr. Speaker, National's decision to wind back the smoke-free Aotearoa agenda is a disgrace to New Zealand as a country. It is an international embarrassment, and it is making headlines around the world for all the wrong reasons.
How do you feel about vaping?
Yeah, vaping's a tricky one. Obviously, no one ever wanted it to have sort of the grip on some of our kids that it does now. It was never intended to be for children. It was never intended to be for non-smokers to use. It was always intended to be an option to help people shift from tobacco. And in the beginning, well, even still now, it has worked for a lot of our long-term smokers that have tried other methods and just haven't been able to break away. So I think it does have a place, but we didn't roll it out how we should have. We weren't careful. We didn't look after our rangatahi. That it was too accessible. Even now, like, you can see how many of these vape stores are around. It's ridiculous. And once again, saturated in those same neighbourhoods that I was speaking about earlier with the tobacco outlets. It just seems to be everywhere. And if you speak to any sort of intermediate high school principal, if you ask them what the top issue affecting them is, it's vaping. That's crazy.
Yeah, I guess it's seen as, I suppose, trendy to young people. Obviously, they've never tried a cigarette in their lives, but then they pick up a vape. Do you ever wonder, because I was thinking about this, and when I was younger, smoking was quote unquote cool, right? And that's probably why I started when I was so young. In terms of trends are cyclical. Do you ever think that smoking, there's a chance of smoking to become cool again once all the vaping has worn off? And is that a real worry?
Yeah, I think it's always a worry. We don't know how trends are going to go. But even when it comes to tobacco, like making it trendy, it didn't just happen. It was very purposeful. It was very intentional by the tobacco industry. They were putting cigarettes into music videos, onto MTV, like all these different places, and like it didn't just happen. So that's why we need to make sure that we're very purposeful with any measures that we put in place, because stuff doesn't just happen, but we do have to make sure that those protections are there.
In terms of vaping, I know that the advertising is watered down quite a bit now, but is there anything further that we can do to try and stop youth from picking up a vape, or maybe banning specific flavours altogether or something like that, making them all black and boring and, tobacco flavoured or something?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of measures that we could still employ, and a lot of them are similar to the approach that we took with tobacco. So we can make the packets less appealing. We can make the flavors, well, that's not a tobacco one, but we can make the flavors less appealing to children, even the name, all those sorts of things. Once again, the amount of outlets there are, it's crazy. Silly little things, like it's almost like they're circumventing the rules, but they're not. It's sort of like those store within a store at a dairy where they sort of have two doors, but it's the same store, the same person, and there's like a piece of timber up there that separates the two, and then they're allowed to be a vape store. Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't think it's in the spirit of the law. So we need to sort of tidy up all those little things. The placement of vape stores, we've got them still close to schools. Like, we brought in some rules around the placement of them, but it didn't apply to any of the ones which were already close to schools, and there was even a delay from the announcement until when it was rolled out, and a whole lot more vape stores popped up within those zones that we know we don't want vape stores in the meantime. So there's lots of things we could and we should be doing to make sure that we don't end up with another problem. Well, I think the problem's already here, to be honest, but we need to start trying to actively work against those things.
So, Jason, where do we go to from now? Do we kind of need to smoke-free 2035 or something?
That's a very good question. I guess for so long we've always been focused on the smoke-free 2025 goal, but it's not a thing that we miss and then we stop. I think we really do need to double down on our efforts now, because people are still dying from this product. We need to get it out of New Zealand. It sort of serves no purpose. It's almost like a wasp, if you will. Like there's no redeeming qualities to it. I think the only thing you ever hear is someone saying that it helps me relax, but that's usually from smokers, and it's because they're addicted. So it's sort of curbing that nagging sound in the back of their head that's telling them that they need nicotine.
Were you ever a smoker?
No, I couldn't afford it when I was a kid, to be honest. Probably wasn't cool enough either. Tried it a couple of times. It tasted like rubbish, so I never sort of pursued it.
It does, man. It's awful. And I think because I stopped smoking because I picked up the vape, so I am actually a converted smoker. And and then you taper down from over time. But I remember thinking, once you're over that push, you go out and you're like, oh my God, did I smell like that all the time? I remember like dousing myself with perfume after going for a smoko, and you think, wow, like you are really, it's an addiction. And once you're in that bubble, and you can only see it when you're out of it.
Exactly.
Oh, thanks so much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for your time today.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Jane Yee and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.